So just some quick thoughts on the ACL side of it before we jump into ACL and give you some actual exposure to ACL as a product from a record sampling point of view. The cell, again, is the combination of the fixed interval and random sampling. Fixed interval every 100, random, again, just random of everything. Cell is kind of the mixture of both, which I like a little bit better, but you decide what you'd like to do. Best to extract the data prior to sampling to ensure the population is properly set. So what I find is that you can sample with like if statements and filters and all that, but I just think it's a lot cleaner to make an extract of the data based on whatever criteria you have. And let's say one of the criteria might be to remove all voided items from the transactions before we do anything. That would be a good example, and therefore something that we should do prior. Okay, we're not up to polling question 2. Give me 1 second here. I'm just going to jump over to ACL. Okay, so we will be providing this data for you and also walking now through the various ACL concepts. All I have here is some invoice data. Could be accounts payable, could be sales data. I think it's technically sales data. But with that said, what we're going to do is we can sample with this data. We're going to sample with it in Excel a little bit later as well, just so that you get a varied perspective of sampling. But by clicking on the sample button, you have calculate, sample records, and evaluate, just like we had talked about in the slides. We have a population of 4999, which you can see at the bottom there in your record type, the record view down below. What you can do if you wanted to filter, and let's just say for a minute here, just say anything where the amount is greater than 1,000. And taking a look here at this amount field greater than 1,000, we have kind of, we have a question mark there, so we can do an analyze count and show that you have 2,276 items that are greater than 1,000. Now, while I could continue onward here and go to sampling, what I normally do is I go to sample records, and go to record, and then click on the size button. If you do that, I know I did that pretty quickly, but you kind of go to sampling, sample, and then click on this size button right here. It's kind of I think it's a better way of doing things in that it will bring through the population that is set. So if I select random there as well, it will bring through this population. I always get a little bit nervous though, because I wonder, given this is filtered data, is it going to kind of get that if statement in there properly, or do I need to add the if statement here to the sample? Generally speaking, you don't need to add the if statement here, but what I like to do, again, this just being a simple approach here, you could maybe say if it's payment date greater than a certain date. I always like to extract my data to a new file, and again, maybe we just call it extracted right now, so it's something we can easily overwrite a little bit later. And once we've we have now this extracted data set, what we can now do is go back and do our sampling, and once again our records now 2276 sampling. I click on sample records. We can go to record in this case because that's what we're doing. We have random where it'll put the population in there, and again it's set down here as well. We can go to fixed interval where you can decide based on the size what that interval is, or we can go to cell. Let's just kind of stick with random, but now let me go to my size, and that, again, what that's going to do is set up the size as well as the seed in here, and how, basically how large we should make it. Let's play around with this just so you can kind of see, 90% confident out of a population of 2276 that my upper error limit is, say, 3%, and my expected error rate is 1%. Now, I think a lot of you may want to put 0.01, something like that, and 0.03. It feels like that's what you want to do here, but don't do that. You're stating it in the whole percentages, and then you click calculate. So, wow, population, I have to calculate a sample size of 178. Let me just say my upper error limit now is, say, 5%. Let's calculate that. Drops it down dramatically by 100 items. My expected error rate, let's say, go to 2%. That's going to bring it up again, so we kind of want to lower that down as much as we can. Let's keep going here and say my beta upper error limit in this case is 10%. We'll calculate that, and that brings it down to about 40. So again, this is something that you can play with as you'd like to. I mean, I think most people would say that if I'm testing something, that probably 5% is a pretty good number to say as an upper error limit. From a perspective of 2276 times 5% is about 114 items. So you're saying that I 90% confident that we don't have 114 items that are not meeting this control, but I do expect about 22, to 23 of them to have a problem. And that's based on the expected error rate. Okay, so the sample size is 78, interval 29.17, and then there's the number of tolerable errors being shown. Okay, by clicking on the OK button, that brings us now back, and that size comes back here. Now, the seed, you can change the seed here. You can put in a number, some crazy number. I usually will just go with the random seed that ACL comes up with, but we'll talk about that seed in a few minutes here, because I'm pretty sure I can prove something to you using that seed. The seed is basically where is it going to start in this, in the record set when it does that random sampling. So you can put something in there. My suggestion to you is to keep it blank so that it's randomly generated every time, and then that will allow you to do that. So again, we have population, our size is 78, blank on the seed, and let's go to a file called sample 90 _5 _1. Sounds good, and we'll hit the OK button. So that then pulled our sample of 78 items, and just kind of notice here, invoice number 20061, record 10 20540. Not that you can remember all this stuff, but just try to keep that in the back of your mind a little bit. Okay, we'll go back now to the log of ACL, and let's take a look at that sample. So I like personally to copy this information. I do find that this is very useful for work papers to show what you did, how you did it, etc. Again, at this point, the seed was 24. So note that seed was 24. Let's go back to that original data, which was called extracted. That was the one where I extracted items over than 1,000. Hit the sampling record, random, record, size of 78. Seed, I'm going to put in 24 now. And I'm going to go to a file called, here we'll call it sample 95 version 2. So I followed the same technique, nothing changed. I just put the seed in there again. And what should have happened, I thought it would have happened, maybe I picked the wrong one, but I always thought that it would pick the same sample at that point. And I could be wrong about that. And so it said the initial selection point was 19 in this case. So it used the seed as a starting point in doing its random calculation. Some products that I've seen, they actually will pick the same sample twice for you. So it won't actually, so you'll end up getting literally the same records coming out. So invoice number would be like 20061 was like the first one coming out kind of thing. I'll just try to prove that to myself. Yeah, I mean, that is definitely not happening here, so that's good. I mean, that ACL is truly doing it in a random way, and there's no way to recalculate that random sample. It's something where it's randomly doing it each time. Again, I like to copy this because I think it's a useful set of work paper information. All right, now I'm just going to go back to the extracted file, and I'm just going to show you a couple of other options. Everything else seems to work the same way. If I go to record, fixed interval, instead of random, and click on size, it's kind of the same stuff, right? I mean, it's 90, Well, the upper error limit in this case is 5. The expected error limit is 1. I'm calculating. Whoop, 78. Intervals 2917. I hit OK. So now this is where, again, it's going to interval through, and the starting point would be kind of like that random seed. Now this is where it will definitely pick the same items twice if you put the same start item here. So if I put in 24 two times, it's going to start at the 24 record, go 29.17 if that's possible, and then 29.17 again and again. And it's going through that fixed interval of the records to ultimately get to a selection of 78. And it's going to kind of keep wrapping through the data until it does that. I like to keep the start blank, so then that way, again, it allows ACL to select a random kind of start point, and therefore, I think is just a better way to go. I will do this to, and now I'll call it maybe fix. Oops, sorry. Call it fix sample 90_5_1 for the fix sample. Hit the OK button. And interesting, we got 79 records because it was sort of one over, probably because of that 29.17. And again, that is now your ultimate sample size. Okay, so let's go back now to the extracted file. We'll do this one more time, but now we're going to do this using cell technique. And again, I can put in, just to keep this quick here, I can put in the 29.17. And again, random seed, you have the option here of kind of seeding the data with a random seed or a seed that you'd prefer to use. I usually keep it blank, and then we'll do this to a file. Now this one's called cell, and the cell, as we've said a few times, is going to actually go through and randomly select an item between, say, 1 and 2917, and then 29.18 to 58 point whatever 34. It'll keep kind of going through that calculation and randomly selecting within each interval. So let's click on that. Again, we get our 79 records, and it's sort of a combination of the fixed and random sampling.